The king's house, as it's described in the biblical text, it has been discovered in the city of David. Guys, in this presentation, we're going to look at the city of David and the place that Eilat Mazar described as King David's palace. It's a very, very exciting discovery, and please bear with us as we walk through the old city of Jerusalem and show you this place. Here, we're in the city of David, which is in the southern and eastern portion outside of the old city walls. And it's very important that the audience understand that this is a recent discovery. This is a 100-year-old picture, and 100 years ago, it was just farmland. But now, we can see the city of David. Old photograph. And it's showing us the city of David here. The Giyavati parking lot is here. You can see all of this is just fields. Okay. This is, we know, the area called the Ophel. Now, this is what it looks like today, and there you can see in the blue circle the area we're going to look at as King David's palace, or the king's house. There on the right bottom corner, you see the Gihon Spring. Very important for us in the biblical text in 1 Kings chapter 1. Solomon is anointed king by the Gihon Spring. That is, in fact, the Gihon Spring there. And now, as we look here, I want to show you a little bit of the graphic of where you can see the house. You can see the levels, the mystery of the foundation stones. But David captured the stronghold of Zion, which is now the city of David. So the palace of David, or the stronghold of David, was the city of David. And then he named it the city of David. But here is the impressive stone structure uncovering part of the enormous support walls. Scholars are divided regarding the date of the construction, but claim to be the 13th century BCE. Perhaps part of the foundation of the Canaanite Jebusite. So this is before David. Okay, captured by David. Others suggest, so there's different views on what this is. But essentially, what we need to get from this is that the fortification of David and the temple were right next to each other, okay? And so that's part of what we're looking at here. If you're wondering what King David's palace looks like today, this is it. This is very exciting. However, the tourists think when they come to Jerusalem that they will see intact buildings, intact structures, going back to the time of Christ, going back to the time of King David. However, it's very important that the people understand that Jerusalem has gone through several phases of absolute destruction by fire, by toppling of buildings, by such destruction that very little is left behind that survives. We're left with pottery shards, things that can survive fire, remnants of burnt wood, etc. Okay? However, a couple things that do survive that are very important for us are seals. Seal impression. Quite often they will call it a bulla, which is the Latin name, but basically it is a scribe would seal a document with his name. Now the type of seal and the writing would give us an indication of the time period and the person's order and rank. It's kind of like a business card. But Dr. Eilat Mazar identified this area by a capital. And what a capital is, it's the top of a pillar. On the top of a pillar, there was a certain style, a Phoenician style capital that was discovered, which you see here. Now, this is a Phoenician style. This is not normal to the area, but this makes sense because it was the king of Tyre in southern Lebanon, which you can see here, made this King David palace, which you can see in 2 Samuel. So she said that style is Phoenician, which is the same as Tyre, in that area we know is southern Lebanon, and that king, you can see, built David a house. So the excavations are ongoing, but that was the reason she decided to dig here. Now, when the excavations took place, the main thing we found, or I shouldn't say we, I'm an independent researcher. I'm not an archaeologist. I should just make that clear. But my enthusiasm as a student in archaeology, I may say we, so I apologize for that. But here we are looking out on what we believe to be King David's palace, looking out beyond And below us are actual buildings, and we can see ancient Paleo-Hebrew writing in tombs, in buildings, and many things proving that this is, in fact, the site. So below us there is the Kidron Valley, and also below those buildings there to the left is the scribe's chamber, which we'll get into later. But throughout this area, in various rooms and in various places, these different seal impressions were discovered. Now, not only do we have these seal impressions of someone's name, we can actually see the person's name in the book of Jeremiah.
Okay, here we have a seal. This is very significant, guys. This is called a bulla. See, at this spot, a bulla, an imprint in clay used to seal documents. So we have a bulla. This is a particular scribe. It's very small, the size of your fingertip, and it would seal a document. So in Jeremiah 32, you can see this is a scribe in Jeremiah 38:1. A scribe would have sealed a document. Now,
so there we can see the actual person, the name of their father, servant of the king. Proof of the biblical text is accurate. But not only that, we would like to propose that there's more going on here than just finding a seal impression and finding the seal impression in the biblical text, but the location of where the seal impression was found is very significant, and that's what we'd like to propose to you. So here is a map of the area of the king's house, King David's palace, and there you can see, if you look closely, you can see the Eutychosia. There you can see the bulla. Where it was found in a place we might call a chamber. And it's possible that where it was found was his actual chamber that was part of the king's house. So many of these scribes had rooms in the temple in the king's house. Here you can see one of them, Jeremiah, belonged to Jeremiah. These are some replica seals, okay? And we have the famous scribe Baruch, who was Jeremiah's personal scribe, a replica of his seal impression. We find them both in Jeremiah. Chapter 36, verse 10, Then read Baruch the book of the words of Jeremiah in the house of the Lord, in the chamber of Jeremiah, the son of Shaphan, the scribe, in the higher court at the entry of the new gate of the Lord's house. So we have not only the scribe, but they have chambers. Isn't that amazing? Here we're holding a replica of Jeremiah's seal, and then we can see that he actually had a chamber in a room in the temple. Amazing. Now, that was discovered in a place called the Bulla house, which you see at the bottom of the screen. This is the scribe's chamber. Okay? We'll read that in Jeremiah 36 as well. But this is the scribe's chamber where all the scribes held chambers and offices. They went down into the king's house, into the scribe's chamber. All the princes sat there. Elishama, the scribe, Jeremiah, the son of Shaphan, the scribe. So there you can see the close proximity of the king's house and the scribe's chamber.
okay, here we have the steps of ascent. Above would have been possibly David's palace, and we have a home here just below, and we do have more of the scribes mentioned. This is Jeremiah 36, Jeriyahu. But within this is the scribe's room, and many bulla, many seals were found here.
Where exactly is the scribe's chamber, you ask? Well, it's right below us. It's right down here. Unfortunately, the visitor center is covering over the area where the archaeology took place to find the scribe's chamber, the house of Bulla. But that's okay. We can read the signs and we can read the information and see that this was in fact places where great destruction took place. We have the burnt house, we have the burnt room, and the house of Bulla. So this is where we see the destruction of the temple, destruction of the palace, and at the lower end of the excavation site, the archaeologists found remains of the archive known as the House of Bula. We're calling it the scribe's chamber. The fire consumed all the scrolls and documents, but hardened and preserved the Bula, and imprinted seal impressions which papyrus documents were sealed. Some of the Bula bear names from the Bible, as we have read to you. Jeremiah, son of Shaphan, who was a high-ranking official in the court of the king. As we read in Jeremiah 36:12, that not only did we find his chamber, he had a chamber, Jeremiah had a chamber in the house of the Lord, in the temple. And below where we're standing right now, we find his actual seal impression in the chamber of the scribes. And we saw very clearly that the scribe's room is next to the king's house. So we have the scribe chamber down below. There you can see in front of us the house of Ahiel. These are noble people, and that's what we're looking at in front of us, the remains of their destroyed houses. And then up above here is the king's palace, or the king's house. And clearly, from the biblical text, it says that those are in close proximity to each other. So that we have the temple, the king's house, and the scribe's chamber, as we saw in Jeremiah chapter 36. So in this area, we have clear evidence and remains of First Temple period artifacts. Not only that, we can clearly understand by reading the biblical text and looking at the archaeology that the seals were found. If we look again down below where the scribe's chamber was, okay, and we look up above, we see the king's house. Simple common sense, we can see the biblical text is very accurate. It's very clear that many of the scribes had chambers, offices, down below where the scribe's chamber was, and then up above in the king's house. They also had chambers that the scribes had, servants to the king. They went into the king, into the court, but they laid up the scroll in the chamber of Elishama, the scribe, and told all the words in the ears of the king. Now, Elishama, we actually have his seal impression as well, which you see a drawing of it here. Okay, but he had a chamber in the king's court. So the king sent Yehudi to fetch the scroll, and he took it out of Elishama the scribe's chamber. So the scribes held chambers, just like you see Eutychus there. That's where his seal impression was found. That is possibly his chamber. Now, we don't exactly know where the king's court is and the king's house. There's different opinions on this and archaeological drawings. But what we can learn is that the scribes had chambers in the king's house and in the temple. In the house of the Lord, they also had chambers, which we saw before. And we have chambers in the king's house, or the court of the king, which is very, very important. Now let's look at the bakery. And Zedekiah the king commanded that they should commit Jeremiah into the court of the prison. This is in the king's house. And that they should give him daily a piece of bread out of the baker's street, or the royal bakery. So Jeremiah is held in the king's house. And Dr. Alat Mazar found the Isaiah seal and the Hezekiah seal in close proximity to a royal bakery. Amazing. Here is the bakery. Here is the area where you can see very large containers for dry and liquid measures. And she described this as the royal bakery, which makes perfect sense, being that it was the baker's street, or without. So it's in very close proximity, guys, what we're looking at here, to the king's house. We'll show you on the map where this is exactly, but this is the king's bakery, or the royal bakery.
Okay, this is an example of an ephah that we see in Zechariah chapter 5. It's a container. In the Greek, it's called pithoi. But these are some examples of some that they've actually found in the Ophel. So we actually see the size, the measurement, and even Hebrew inscriptions.
The royal bakery. The reason we call it a royal bakery is a refuse pile found the Isaiah Bulla and the Hezekiah Bulla, both of which we, of course, have copies of. Very excited to share with you the prophet Isaiah, his actual seal impression, which you see replicas here, and the great king Hezekiah, his seal impression, were found in a refuse pile next to what we consider to be the royal bakery. Now, where is that? It's very close to the king's house. In the top right corner there, the triangle shape is the bakery. In the bottom there, circled area going down the slope, is the king's house. Okay, both of those are very close, but the proof and evidence of that actual area is First Temple period. And with those containers and the number of them discovered, we do believe that that does lend itself to Jeremiah 37 and the royal bakery that is described there. Facing north now, we can see the Dome of the Rock. And as we pan over to the right, we can see the area we saw the bakery. This is called the Ophel. And the Ophel has many amazing discoveries there in archaeology. And as we look down towards the south a little bit, we begin to see the structure of King David's palace. And this is all the city of David that you're looking at here. And let's remember that if just 100 years ago or so, this was all covered. Nobody actually knew where the city of David was. But now we can see all this proof, all this evidence. When Charles Warren found the Gihon Spring and digs started taking place over the course of the last 100 years, it really became clear this is the city of David. And keep in mind, guys, some of the seals and bulla and things we're sharing with you, some of those come from the mid-70s, like Baruch. And so many people said, oh, that's fraudulent. But as digs and information came, these seals became authentic. We could see their precise location. We could understand that these are really the biblical characters. But now we're above ground. We're at the City of David Visitor Center. And we just want to show you from Street View as we enter the Visitor Center and go down where the King David's Palace is. So it's a very active place. And as you can see, we turn over to the right here and you see the staircase and you go down. Below the Visitor Center is the foundations of the King David's Palace here. And really what we need is our maps and everything to kind of pinpoint what foundations we're looking at and exactly what we're looking at. But the basics is we understand the seal impressions are very important to understand. We also understand the importance of the pillar of the king of Tyre that built the fortress, built the king's house for David. Okay? Very, very important. And we have to remember as well, we have all the evidence of what the scriptures talked about. Actually, Jeremiah warning these people, look, destruction is coming. And we have the evidence of all that destruction. So there is the pillar and the capiter, similar to what you see, Phoenician style, in the area of southern Lebanon. King Tyre helped build David a house, 2 Samuel chapter 5. So with all this information, the Gihon Spring, the scribe room, the pillar, this is King David's palace. Now there's some markings here I thought were very interesting. I wanted to show you something else. This is another area that's only come up in the last few years or so that has similar markings in the floor. It's down below the, on the way down the hill towards the Gihon Spring. And there's these interesting markings in the floor. We don't exactly know what these are. There's different speculations, maybe holding livestock. But some people think that this particular area here is where David first came and did worship. So you have troughs and things that could have collected the blood of animals, circular shapes for pressing maybe an olive press, these strange shapes in the floor. So it's something I just wanted to share with you because I thought it was really interesting. And we'll see in the future what this really means, who knows. But this is down below the hill from King David's palace, by the way. But I just wanted to show you some things here so that you can see the Bible with your own eyes, okay? And there's things like this olive press, we're uncertain as to who or what this is, but it does date back to First Temple type period. And here is the area of the Gihon Spring, where it begins And we can read the plaque here talking about Solomon being anointed king. The Canaanite pool. Okay, and again, to cause Solomon, my son, to ride upon the mule, to bring him down to Gihon and Zadok the priest. So there was a pool carved into the rock 3,800 years ago. Now, as amazing, as an exciting discovery this is to find King David's palace, it's important that my audience understand that we should not expect the academic community and mainstream archaeological structures to accept this. Why? We have all this information, we have all this support of Bula seals in precise locations. For example, this one. This is called the Nathan Melech seal impression, and this was found right next to the King David's Palace area in a place called Gavati parking lot. I have another video, I'm not going to talk much about it, but this gives you an example of what the seal looks like, and then you would press it and you would have a seal impression like this. Now, why is it that there won't be a change in the academic community? Simply put, this seal impression you're looking at here is a person only mentioned once in the Bible, and he is in the western gate of the temple of the house of the Lord. Okay? So what begins to happen is if you come to terms that, okay, this is the king's house the scripture is talking about, the king's house is right next to the temple, people. Okay? So that would mean they would have to say, okay, the Temple Mount is not the place of the first and second temples. All right? But the archaeology supports the fact that between the Ophel and the city of David, in this area, where this seal, where Jeremiah's seal, where all these are found, okay, Jeremiah had a chamber in the house of the Lord. Okay? Then you have to come to terms with the temple is not on what the people call the Temple Mount. Now, this is also supported by other writings and in the scriptures. Like, for example, 1 Kings chapter 9, it talks about the king's house being close to the temple, so that the guards and the people that guarded the temple, the king's house is right next to the temple. So if you come to terms with where the king's house is, you now have to come to terms with the temple is going to be right next to it. Okay? What I'm showing you here is some drawings of Ezekiel's temple. In Ezekiel's temple, you have a section of the inner court. In the center here would be the altar. You have gates. Then you have the temple. Then you have another building called the Western Building, and we're suggesting that that building is the king's house. Okay? And so just like you have the king's house, there you can see King David's palace, and next to it would have been the temple. So in 1 Kings 9, the guards were at the corners of the house, the corners of the altar here, and they guarded the king's house. That means that the king's house was close to the temple. Throughout Jeremiah chapters 35, 36, 37, it becomes clear when you read that the king's house is right next to the house of the Lord. Thanks for watching. We have many other videos of tours throughout Jerusalem. If you are interested, we have a playlist called Jerusalem Tours. We also have a playlist on where is the true location of the temple. And we certainly do believe it is between the city of David and the Ophel area, as all this information supports. So we have many other videos on that. In particular, definitely watch the Nathan Melech video. We get more into the details of how we know that is the western gate of the temple. If you're interested in any of these seals, I will have links in the description field for where you can purchase these. These are great witnessing tools to tell people the Bible is true. The people in the Bible You can read the Bible and you can show them a replica of their seal impression. That is amazing. That's what archaeology can do. So, definitely get some of those. They're not expensive, around $20, $25 each. I don't make any money from that. I don't make any money from YouTube either. I'm doing this to show the people the truth. Okay? And the prophets and the rocks are coming out of the ground and they're crying out for truth. Okay? So, thank you for watching, and God bless you.